Most Canadian megaprojects don't fail at permitting. They fail at the spreadsheet. But by the time anybody notices, the only recourse is often a taxpayer rescue. I've worked on the regulator side, the policy side, and the operator side of large projects. The story that industry tells itself is that permitting is the major obstacle. I think that story is simplistic at best and is masking over some much bigger issues. But let's start with the proponent's case because it is a fair one. If you're a VP at a mine, a utility, or an energy developer, your timelines are brutal. Carrying costs on a stalled multi-billion-dollar project can easily eat 15 to 25% of your net present value before you've even put a shovel in the ground. So you model the tightest credible numbers. If you didn't, your project could die in committee. That's not dishonesty. That's the system, and it's a fair argument. But it is feeding into the misconception. Because the line you hear at every conference is that if Ottawa just streamlined permitting, then capital would flow easily. The federal opposition runs on this, some premiers run on it, and it's not wrong, it's just incomplete. And this incomplete part is getting very expensive. Let's look at Trans Mountain. It came in at 533% over its original estimate. That's north of $34 billion. And you can't just pin that all on permitting. The postmortems point to underestimated labor, construction, and financing costs. Muskrat Falls in Labrador got approved and built, but costs ran from $6.2 billion to more than $13 billion because they had a weak business case. The CEO of Nalcor, the company that oversaw the project, even called it a boondoggle. Neither project failed at the regulator. They cleared the regulator. They failed at the capital structure. Ultimately, both landed in state rescue. Federal guarantees for Trans Mountain reached $19 billion. For Muskrat Falls, they reached $9 billion. Newfoundland nearly entered a fiscal crisis due to this project. Now let's compare this to Seabridge's KSM project in BC, the third largest undeveloped copper resource on Earth. It's held federal and provincial approvals for over a decade, and yet it still hasn't reached a final investment decision. If permitting were the real problem, why hasn't this project moved forward? Because the economics don't support it. So this project is permitted but unfinanceable and therefore unbuilt. A permit does not mean that the economics support the project. So how do projects become permitted yet not financeable? First, optimism is baked into the way that we estimate. Ben Flyberg's research is conical work here. 9 out of 10 megaprojects worldwide come in over budget. Why, you ask? The early numbers get produced before the design is finished and when political momentum depends on it looking attractive. Later increases are viewed as overruns, but honestly, some of it was never priced honestly in the first place. Second, governance on Crown utility megaprojects isn't actually independent. The Milbourne Review of Site C found that 6 members of the Project Assurance Board were also members of BC Hydro's board. Nobody in the room had the job of saying, slow down. The geotechnical risk on the Peace River was treated as low probability and left unfunded. So when the foundation did need stabilizing, there was no circuit breaker. That's not a people problem, it's a design problem. Third, Indigenous funding shows up at the wrong end of the project. Loan guarantees are real and useful money, but currently they're a last mile tool. They emerge at project close. They don't fund the legal and the financial work a community needs before close to negotiate a real equity stake. So participation from Indigenous groups arrives late, gets thin, or gets litigated. This might seem obvious, but Indigenous groups who aren't included in the value creation of a project crossing their land from the very beginning are much less likely to support it. So, what do? First, stage gate the financing separate from the permit. Right now, some people look at approved as shovel-ready when it isn't. A project should clear a financial gate at concept, at assessment entry, at approval, and at the final investment decision. Each gate forces a real cost estimate, a real revenue model, a real capital structure, and a real Indigenous participation pathway. The federal and the provincial major project offices are the ones who need to act here. The cost of this approach is that some projects die earlier, and that might feel like failure, but in reality, it's the system clearing out what was never viable and protecting the credibility of what is. Second, independent cost and revenue assurance before any public money goes in. If you want a loan guarantee, a concessional loan, a ratepayer recovery, the project needs to be reviewed by people who have no stake in the project. That's not more consultation. That's financial due diligence. Finance Canada and the provincial treasuries already have the authority to do this. They just don't use it consistently. Third, a first mile Indigenous finance mechanism, which acts as a complement to Indigenous loan guarantees, not a replacement. These capacity grants would help First Nations actually evaluate and structure a deal before it closes. Alberta's Indigenous Opportunities Corporation already pairs guarantees with capacity support. One idea that we could do is carve out something like 2% of the federal guarantee program as non-repayable capacity grants. The cost might be is that some communities study a project and then they walk away. That's not failure. That's due diligence working. A fair critique of all of this is that more gates means more delays, but I doubt it. Canada already delays projects. It just does so after approval, when the cost of the rescue is more than discipline ever would have been. From where I sit, having worked on all three sides, the proponents who figure this out will be the first ones to close the gap on their competitors. The ones who don't will keep blaming the permitting system while their project dies quietly in the capital stack. So let's review. Approvals do not mean capital readiness. Pretending otherwise is the most expensive mistake in Canadian infrastructure. If you're running a project where the spreadsheet that got you your approval can't really support your final investment decision, I'd be curious about the problems you're facing on the ground. Please reach out directly or leave a comment below. To everybody else, thank you for watching.